Firestarter is the latest Stephen King adaptation to hit the big screen. This one is, of course, produced by Blumhouse Pictures. It's the same exact story that you already know from the original movie, from the original book. Husband and wife get experimented on in college, get superpowers, try to hide from the government, live a low-key life, get a daughter, but that daughter also has superpowers, gets harder to control and contain, what exactly she can do, which is start fires with her mind. So the government notices and they go on the run. The same exact story that you already know. When they released the trailer for this movie, I was honestly kind of surprised. I was reminded oh yeah, didn't they say they were doing a Firestarter movie with Zac Efron? I think I vaguely remember that being announced, So I was really surprised when the marketing started, but then again, you take into consideration it is a Blumhouse movie, and not to completely diss on them or anything, but they are famous for producing stuff cheaper than a lot of other movies, which in some cases means some marketing for movies doesn't get utilized all that well, and it's easy to forget that they're coming out. That's unfortunately the case with a new Stephen King adaptation. It doesn't help that this was also a movie that they decided, it's going to be released in theaters, but also it's going straight to Peacock, day of. Even though it's been 2 years since 2020, and obviously I can understand the concern still of going back to the theater, but no one is really doing same day releases on streaming and in theaters anymore, because I think everyone realizes that's a bad idea, and it only further, discourages people from ever going back to the theater. But whatever. I guess in this case it's fine because nobody gives a shit about this movie. I was like, okay, it looks fine. I'm wary just because it is Blumhouse. But whatever, it could be alright. I looked up the creative team afterwards and I was like, oh, well, yeah, maybe this could be interesting. It's from the director, Keith Thomas, who did The Vigil, which I talked about last year, a low-budget horror film that I loved immensely. If you have not checked it out, please do. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting religious one location kind of bottle horror film. I enjoyed it quite a lot. It's well directed by Keith Thomas, and I was like, okay, if he's doing this, then maybe we've got something here. And you have a screenwriter who worked on Halloween Kills, which if you've seen my review for it, not favorable at all towards that movie or its screenwriting especially, but he also worked on a movie that was also a directorial debut from him called The Quarry, which, I have my issues with it. It's not my favorite movie or anything, but I thought, okay, he can make some good stuff. That was a, solid movie. So maybe this combination and the fact that it is a King book and everyone is kind of expecting more from King adaptations lately, maybe we've got something good here. Maybe Jason Blum picked the right one this time. And I can definitely say that my favorite parts about this movie are some of the ideas it presents. The way this movie opens, it's definitely starting off in a much better place than I would say the original Firestarter movie did, where that movie, I feel like the structure of that in the beginning act was kind of wonky, and I'm not sure about starting it here. It feels like you're rushing over a lot of the interesting stuff. When this movie started, I was like, okay, we're going to spend a little bit more time in this place that I found to be more compelling. That's cool, I thought it started off really well. The title card hits, and then the movie kind of starts to, falter from there. But just to continue my point that I think Keith Thomas definitely could have made a good movie out of this is that, there's certain ways that he tries to spice up how you see some of the powers executed, some of the suspense stuff, and it's not bad ideas, when you see them at first. You're like, okay, yeah, that's a neat thing that's going on here. It's not the most terribly directed movie in the world or anything like that. And I can also say that there are some performances that rise to the level of, good, passable. Zac Efron is incredibly talented, and I think he does a solid job here. Kira Armstrong, she's the main character, and, I watched her in a season of American Horror Story very recently where she kind of plays a, good girl turned, evil Satanist child. So I was like, yeah, she's probably gonna nail this role, and she did. She did a really good job, what can I say? Other than that, it's really hard to talk about positives with this movie for too long because it's just kind of, cherry picking well, this wasn't too bad, and this, could have been worse. So let's just talk about this movie. I want to ask you guys this question. You ever just watch a movie and every single scene you are constantly aware that you are watching actors act? And I don't just mean the typical thing of oh yeah, I know I'm watching a movie because, movies aren't real and all that stuff. I mean, actually you're watching a movie and you just get this vibe from the way the camera is set up, the way it's being filmed, the way the actors are delivering their lines. You get this feeling of, I'm watching people make a movie right now. But that's not why I watch movies, to see people making movies. I'm here to be transported into this other world, this new story, to be fully immersed. You know, that's the thing about movies, is that they're magic tricks to make you think what you're watching is a real thing. You get invested in it, you know, you're just totally sucked out of the realm of like, yeah, people are behind a camera right now and, you know, rigging everything to make sure it goes as planned. This is one of those movies where I was watching it and there was something just about the clunky dialogue and the way these actors are directed mostly, where I was like, God, I'm watching a movie right now. There's no scene in this movie that feels like it actually flows together. Every single scene feels like it's in a vacuum, where even though you just saw a scene with the characters in them, it feels like somehow they did not exist before this new scene started. There's just no connective tissue, no good proper flow. It's like the equivalent of like, you know, you just got like a sneak peek of a movie and they released a scene and you're just watching that and you're still missing some of the context. And even though I said, you know, the movie starts off interesting because I was like, yes, this is some of the stuff that I wanted to see more of, it once again kind of starts to like skip out on elaborating on some details, especially like, you know, it's 2022. I don't know when this movie is supposed to take place. I'm assuming more so modern day. They mention smartphones and, you know, there's nothing about it that screams this is a period piece actually from the 90s or anything like that. So how do you like live a low-key life and still have your daughter go to like a public school the way that you do? And they don't really explain it as well as I would like them to. I'm honestly not even entirely sure how they have been, you know, living and hiding from the government and the world for as long as they have. It feels very implausible. And it just doesn't help that, you know, after that opening bit where I was like, okay, we could be going somewhere interesting, every single scene after with these characters, they don't do a good job of actually properly building them up, having their dynamics be fully fleshed out. You're just watching a lot of scenes where they say exposition stuff, you know, we gotta train her. I don't want to do that. That could be dangerous. You've seen what's happened to me when I use my powers. You don't even use yours anymore. Yeah, but we should still train her anyways. And it's just, you know, all this dialogue that makes you feel as an audience member like, this isn't how people talk. I'm watching movie characters talking right now, and I don't believe their personalities, their souls. I don't think they do, you know? I'm watching something that's totally kind of lifeless. As I said, it's kind of like a weird combination of like the dialogue is just really poorly written, and then you also have these actors that feels like they're directed, like everything you see is like the first take. You never see something that is like, you know, beyond that, where they like maybe get a groove for like, okay, I think I know how I'm supposed to approach this now. Well, like I said, I'm not saying that this is what happened, but you get that vibe just because of what you're seeing. Like, this feels like that, and it should not. And as much as I thought, you know, Keith Thomas can probably do something interesting with this direction, and at times there's little seeds of it, you know, there's plenty of moments where the suspense action stuff is so poorly staged and it's, you know, really weirdly edited. And unfortunately, none of the scenes really convey any kind of emotion. You're not in suspense. You're not fearing for the characters. You're not wildly entertained by some of the cool stuff they're doing with the horror, like the camera work, you know, any kind of editing like that. It's just all kind of sloppy and it feels very amateurish, you know. I think it mostly is because, you know, they're working with a very small Blumhouse budget and this story might not really need that. You might need a director who's kind of, you know, ready and willing and has the proper resources to do really cool stuff with the superpower stuff, but instead everything feels like, well, we got to do the cheapest version of this possible. That's like the entire third act of this movie. It feels like the cheapest version of what should be, you know, and it doesn't help that the fire effects, oh my god, the CGI is really bad. It just always looks like a cartoon and it always just appears and starts happening. There's no like interesting build up to how she uses her powers or like, you know, some interesting visual thing. It's always just like, okay, well, let's just add in the fire effects right now. Who cares about, you know, actually mixing it in and, you know, making it look like it's actually happening. It's just, you know, get the camera next to Ryan Curie Armstrong and put some orange light around her. There you go. That's the fire. And all of the personal character stories are just lame to me. You know, all of them fall flat and none of them are really that engaging. You know, you have like this interesting dynamic at one point where, you know, Ryan Curie Armstrong, you know, she's, you know, getting older and she's getting more moody and, you know, rebellious against her parents. At one point sets her mom's arms on fire just because she's mad about the, you know, the situation they're in and, you know, just like, oh my god, guys. And she sets her mom's arms on fire and Zac Efron's like, hey, it's all right, you know, she'll get over it, you know, accept your apology, you know, it's okay, you didn't mean it. And she was like, you're right, I didn't mean it because I was trying to set your arms on fire. I was trying to set you on fire. And he's just kind of like, oh. But then they never really go back to that ever again. And there's no sense of like, Zac Efron fearing for anything. Like, it's just, after that scene, they start to go on the run and he's just like, well, let me try to train you for a bit. And by a bit, I mean literally like a minute when we roast this cat who like scratched you. Oh boy, there's just everything that I thought, Keith Thomas could do this really well, a reboot could help, flesh some of this stuff out. They just didn't do it, or they had the opportunity to and they just completely missed it or didn't want to because budgetary reasons. Say what you will about the original movie and, it's not perfect. It's got some dated 80s qualities to it. It could have definitely been a way better movie. But, to me, after I watched it, I was like, I watched a story. I watched a movie that utilized a lot of what it could have done, maybe missed some things, but, I thought it was a pretty entertaining movie nonetheless. We don't talk about Firestarter 2 Rekindled, but if I'm being honest, I think I would prefer to watch that two-part miniseries again than something like this because there's at least a bit of like 90s TV charm to that one of like, okay, it's bad and it's kind of boring, but it's like a 90s TV movie and I'm all into that, I guess. It's like it. And this movie just reeks of just boring modern day bullshit. They have like the school bullies, but even the way the school bullies are written, it's like, come on, dude, really? We're going back to this. It feels like, I don't know, at least for me, and I might be forgetting something, but it feels like it's been a while since we've got like proper really terribly written school bullies. In this case, it's mostly just this one kid who's like, hey, freak, what's going on here, freak? You're a weirdo. I hate you. I'm gonna throw this dodgeball at the back of your head. And he's like, fucking 8 years old, and he's acting like an emo edgelord teenager. I just really hate the idea of like school bullies, especially when you do it that young, that they are actually like clever or like sophisticated enough to be like that cruel and mean to someone. Like, that their dialogue reeks of like an adult. It doesn't sound like a kid making fun of someone. And even then, just every time you watch like a classroom scene, it feels like something is off, like this isn't how this would be at all. This isn't how classes are organized, and the kids, especially how young they are, they'd be a little more immature and shit like that. Like nothing feels real. The villains, like, don't even get me started on the villains. You have the corporate villains, the ones trying to, get, the family, get their powers and study them. They're just boring. You have one lady who's just like, I'm trying to take charge because, I don't know, some complex of some kind. But there's just nothing else to that character. I'm not interested in that character. There's several points where it feels like she's like ad-libbing stuff just because of the way she delivers some of her lines. And I was like, is this written or is she ad-libbing right now? It's so weird. It's definitely weirder because she's matched up with Kurtwood Smith, who's not in this movie nearly enough. And he, just for that 1 minute of screen time, delivers something where I was like, oh, I feel something in my heart just because he's delivering dialogue in an interesting way. But then you have her respond to a lot of his stuff and she's just kind of like, I don't really know what you're talking about. It's like, what is this direction? What is this delivery? Oh my goodness, I don't blame her at all. This is totally like, I think someone just made a bad call, creatively behind the camera. And then you get like this movie's Rainbird, and yeah, George C. Scott is the original Rainbird, miscast. He's not supposed to be white, but there is still like an interesting story written for that character. So yes, bad casting, but there is still like, okay, stories going on here. It's interesting. And in this movie, the way it's going back to editing, the way this character is introduced, there's like this weird rock pop song like played over. He's just like sitting. You're supposed to get the vibe like, yeah, this intimidating assassin who's also got superpowers, watch out, little girl, and Zac Efron. He's just listening to like the worst song ever and just sitting like menacingly out the window. It's like a total tonal contrast, and it just made me laugh as soon as it happened. Like, I'm supposed to take this guy seriously? I'm supposed to be intimidated by him? Nah. And they tried to introduce like a redemptive arc for the character that doesn't work. It really doesn't work. It's completely stupid the way they tried to act like, by the end of this movie. By the way, completely abrupt ending. You can tell they ran out of money and this is all they had left to do. But in this abrupt ending, they try to really hit like, well, yeah, the movie was building to this with these characters. And it's like, I don't feel that at all. I feel this is a much more complex situation, and it seems like you're trying to leave it open for like a sequel. I don't want to see this sequel. Why couldn't you just give me a good story right now? Why does Blumhouse always want to cheap out on everything? Just, if you put more money into it and try to hype this movie up a bit more, and also don't put it on Peacock, day of, you might have actually had a success, not a big it level of success, but some kind of thing going. Just, let Keith Thomas be creative. Let people do stuff and not let them worry about, well, Blumhouse only wants us to do it for $5 million, so I don't know. I'm gonna give Firestarter a D+. There's some admirable attempts made behind the scenes and, in front of the camera briefly. And there's a wonderful score actually by John Carpenter. I say wonderful, but I think it's just because, John Carpenter, it's a pretty decent Carpenter score. You're not going to walk away blown away or anything like that. But it was something, it was something compared to the nothing I was getting from everything else. And I wish the best for Keith Thomas in the future. I wish the best for Zac Efron and Ryan Kiera Armstrong, all of these cast members, but this was not the project for them. It's not the project that Stephen King needed. It's yet again another Stephen King adaptation that is just so bad. You know what I mean? Like I really don't understand why it is so hard to make like a Stephen King adaptation still. It feels like the only great ones that we've had are like from Mike Flanagan or It Chapter 1, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, we need more. We need to be doing better. We've had so many other movies from the past that were like, yeah, it could be better. It's kind of entertaining just because it's dated and, corny and all that. But, this is the time where if you're going to do something right with King, this would be it. We know what we have to do. Let's do it. And Blumhouse just did what they always do, and that doesn't work for this, Bummer. But if you've seen Firestarter, leave in the comments below what you thought of it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.